Hello. Hello, guys. As you can tell, trying a new angle. And as you can also tell, serve. Because when you serve others around you, you get something to eat. So if you serve yours around, it will give back. Welcome to episode 30. Was it episode 36? Jesus Christ. Kind of running through this like a girl with the dragon tattoo on a train. Except she is trained for that. And you know what? I don't feel a whole lot of sympathy for her. Seems like a life she created for herself. She wanted these cool tattoos and she wanted to live this exciting life. Well, that's what she get. You want to live exciting lives? You gotta have exciting lives. By the way, side note, something crazy happened yesterday. I should say this morning when I woke up. So I went to upload for today's. I went to go upload episode 35 today, all that stuff. And before I upload it automatically shows up on my analytic page, and we made Often Beat podcast history, guys. So, you know how I told you about the Joe Rogan episode that I did with Yami Park on YouTube? It was getting, now it's like over 300 views, which for a small channel is pretty good. Here's where it's getting crazy, though. For that episode, I woke up. I was expecting maybe 20 listens. It was at 109 downloads for that one episode overnight, spreading across the map like some gonorrhea, like a pap smear. Except in North Korea, like that episode, pap smears probably feel a whole lot different. But I believe even when I came home tonight, it was at 113 downloads. That one episode alone has done, not even exaggerating, 10 times more than my highest episode. So I'm like over 400 downloads all time, and 108 of them were like last night. I just want to give a big shout out to the Often Beat support. I would like to give you guys a name, but I feel like that's just kind of corny. And I will say this, like, actually, I was watching a video about and like YouTubers or creators that use Patreon, right? And I think it's a great platform. I think it's and I understand why people use it specifically. But me personally, like, I feel weird. I would feel weird asking for donations per se, right? And what I mean is, so apparently there's been creators recently, well, not even recently, it's just been a regular thing generally, where they will do live streams. And let me kick my feet up. Ooh. But they'll be doing live streams, literally kind of just basically asking people to donate. Like it's a charity type of thing. And it'll be like, donate what you can to help the pod and, help with production and how much it takes to make an episode. Now, for different shows that actually have production value, that makes sense because there are some where if you're heavily editing, stuff takes money. And I just don't care to spend money at this point in time, as you could tell. But the direct feeling of literally asking someone to donate, as in your fans to donate, let's just say, just a couple $1,000s to you. And it's like, to me, that just kind of feels weird for that specifically. And I know they're donating to the podcast or whatever they're listening to for whatever your show is. But to me, even when I get to that level where I have enough fans that I know would donate, I just personally wouldn't do it. I think people that are really comfortable asking people for money, donations and stuff for something, and a lot of these people make money because they're more well known for different things. Like for podcasting, most of the biggest podcasts are comedians. And so most of them are making bank, like 6 figures a year, or most of them, the big ones, 7, 8 figures type of year. And I noticed like you wouldn't, like even the big brands, like the Joe Rogans, the Your Mom's House podcast with Tom Segura, the ones that are getting million views on YouTube, the ones that are like top of their tier and they make so much money off advertisement. And it's like they make so much money from the podcast in the regular form where people will pay for, or like they get so many views for ad revenue, they get paid for sponsor, they put it out for people to watch for free essentially. And I think that should be the way it is. And then to have people like just ask for money is kind of this weird feeling personally. It's not something I would do, you know? It's just me personally. Like if I were ever, it's kind of like if I were ever homeless. For right or wrong, at that point you probably shouldn't have any pride. But me personally, I would have too much pride to sit there and ask people for money if I feel like that I could do something about it. Like that's just me personally. And to see people in live streams making a whole event, and the weird part is you see how they market it. You gotta be careful. Like they want to make you as an audience member feel so vital and important to why the thing that they're trying to sell to you is what it is. And obviously without fans and without audience, they wouldn't be able to make ad revenue, or they wouldn't be able to make, because no one will watch it, which means you're not going to get much out of it, which means no one's going to sponsor you and pay you $20K an episode to sponsor their Blue Chew product if you're not actually fucking having an audience for them to advertise your product to, or for you to advertise their product to. And the thing that's interesting to me is it's kind of the shamelessness. You got people that are making 6 figures a year, making money off sponsors for their podcast, which sponsors, I don't know if you know how much these sponsors fucking pay. But per episode, sponsors will pay at the low end for podcasts. They will pay, like Joe Rogan, he's going to charge us, like, he's like, you want a sponsor? Shit, $25K each an episode. Because that's how much exposure, you're going to make that money back off exposure, the amount of audience I reach. And even if you're just like a lower tier, but you're a known podcast, like let's say you have 50,000 subscribers on YouTube or something like that, you can obviously you have a sizable enough audience where you create names, and you got to watch out for when they create names for the audience. I'm not going to say like examples because then I'll give it away what I'm saying. But there's a difference between Patreon, where people are paying like extra. It's like, okay, you can watch the free versions of our show on here, but if you want extra episodes, or you want behind the scenes, or you want exclusive content, you want exclusive this, we will have more on here if you like what you see from the free stuff and you want more of that. I think that's good business, because you were still giving your audience a choice of their free will and liberty what to do with their money, but still be a fan of you without feeling they have to literally buy your product. And in this situation, you can't compare buying a product from Walmart and buying an episode in podcasting. They're not the same, because people will say, oh, well, it's no different if you go to Walmart buy a product, you have to pay for the product or you don't get to have it. It's like, okay, here's the differences. There's too many other people in your field that are already doing it for free for their fans. So if you're going to start charging extra, if you're going to start charging just for people to get the basis of your episodes, because the thing I worry about with podcasting, for example, and really YouTube in general, is that people are going to literally just make fans have to pay like $10 a month membership just to watch any of their stuff. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong if you want to have your own website and stuff like that. But I think what people need to realize is that these platforms like YouTube, like Spotify, even if you use Instagram, it's like you are using their platform to build yours and to build your audience. So for people that are sitting here bitching about, oh, well, YouTube doesn't let me, it's like, yeah, you're using their platform. You get ad revenue, you get ways to make money by posting shit on there and all that stuff. So yes, like I don't like, do I love the monetization and you can post some stuff and not other stuff? Like we're not talking about political and censorship, but it's also think of like they are a company and you are using their platform to post your stuff. It's the equivalent of if a podcast like Call Her Daddy works for Barstool, when she did. It's like their whole thing when they had their breakup with Call Her Daddy was that who gets IP, who gets intellectual property, because her and Sophia were pretty much not well known at all. They literally started on YouTube. And after like 4 episodes, they got a direct message from Dave Portnoy, direct message him saying, hey, come in. I want to talk to you about, we can, finance your podcast, put it on our platform and see where it goes. And boom, Call Her Daddy explode overnight, blah, blah, blah. So they're getting a base salary plus whatever bonuses are included and whatever. And then their podcast blew up and all that. So then, of course, people are getting their ear to, you guys should basically kind of like hold out, like holding out in the NBA type of thing. Hey, hold out. Demand more money, test the market, even though they still had a contract to fulfill. And the one girl, Sophia, is like, we could get way more because she had some dumbass in her ear who got in her ear explaining that she was so much more valuable to the podcast, even though the other girl, who's still the one on the podcast, was actually editing. And apparently they write out the script, so it's kind of scripted, but it's still not kind of. But the thing about it that Barstool, the company, the website, brought traffic to the show, and I brought traffic to the show that they may or may not have had if they were doing it independently, per se. There's good and bad to being independent. There's good and bad to being with companies. But we'll just stick with their situation. Barstool, just having the Barstool brand attached in the feed for Call Her Daddy on the feed of Barstool, of course it helped. And then being on that, growing the show, bringing an audience, and then it was able to have the value to sell it or redistribute it exclusively to Spotify, where it's 3 years, $60 million. Now, I believe at the end of the day that good shows will always get paid. Good shows, if they stick with it, will end up getting to where they're going to get to anyways. But in terms of how fast, because it was like 2-3 years ago they started that show, and like a year and a half, 2 later, $60 million for a podcast that's a once a week show that's less than an hour typically, and it's talking about being whores. Like, yeah, of course that shit blew up. But would they have had the value and the speed and the strength and backing behind it without being on the Barstool website, without being owned by Barstool? Because where they can market it, advertise, and do merch and make a shitload of money off of it. And people gotta realize that when you use YouTube or Spotify and shit, just by it being on the biggest platforms and what you're doing, it's everything. It's beyond everything. Like, unless you have a name beforehand, like unless you're a celebrity, like Joe Budden was able to do it independently for a while before going on Spotify, and it blew up the podcast even more. And speaking of Joe Budden, it's like he still has probably the number one hip hop podcast, even though 99% of what they talk about is not even hip hop anymore. But it was the number one, you could say culture podcast, hip hop podcast for like 2 or 3 years. And it was already pretty damn big before it went to Spotify, but Spotify put it on a different level. It just did. And I think that's the thing that Joe Budden missed in that whole situation, is just the simple fact that you're shitting on the company that marketed, promoted it, put at the top of podcast lists when people want to, I want to listen to a different type of podcast. And, what is this what is this being featured? I know Joe Budden. Let me check out this. Oh, wow, I like this. And next thing you know, you got another listener. You got a podcast feed where I believe now it's tied with Apple Podcasts for the most. And it's going to overtake Apple Podcasts. I'm sorry. Spotify is just so much better. And what a lot of people, and what Joe, I think, lost track of, and I know he's all in this independent bag, and they're still going to be making money. He could still find a way to make money, but he wasn't going to make what he was going to make with Spotify. But the thing he was worried about was the long-term ownership of the podcast, which is fair enough. But going back to the point I was focusing on with Call Her Daddy. Wow, it's amazing how I didn't even plan to talk about this. I'm fucking amazing. Must be the relaxation. Look at me relax. Ooh, lax like lacrosse. I'm gonna go to Duke and maybe go to a house, and you may be a hooker waiting for me to get rightfully accused of what they probably did. Anyways, sticks and nets. But yeah, going back to what you gotta, as a creator of a podcast, kind of like, these podcasts are just, it seems disingenuous to me. They're taking advantage of a fan's loyalty, and they are taking money from them on these live stream donations where it's literally just them, guys, please donate, please. It would mean a whole lot, and this and that. It's like, okay, but to be honest, you're making 2 hours of content a week at best. And some of these shows, like hour and a half, they put out 1 episode a week. And if you have, and let's say you have 50,000 subscribers, right? You're probably going to have a minimum 3,000 or 4,000 watching your live stream. And you're going to have like 500 people donate. You have 500 people donate $5. That's what, $2,500? Just by asking for money. Like if you make 15 an hour or less than that, and you work a whole month, 40 hours a week, you probably maybe get 2,500. And then people were going live streams and just, please donate. And you guys donated. I don't get it. If people are famous and they have podcasts and they're dreadfully asking for money, and they're not struggling, and it's just a quick money grab, and they try to put nicknames for your fan base, to me, that comes off as very disingenuous. I'm not saying never give back to a show you listen to. I'm not saying don't join the Patreon. I'm not saying that. But when they just go on these shameless YouTube live streams, and they just like, guys, please donate. And then their reward to you is, I'll show you I care. I'll give you a shout out on the podcast. It's like, And of course people want to feel like, wow, this person that I enjoy listening to, they're going to shout me on their show. I'm going to get 5 seconds of notoriety for being a consistent listener. And it's disingenuous because I think really for most of the time, most people don't really have like this personal bond with your fans, nor do I think it's healthy. Because if you get too attached to your fans, if you have that many fans, you got to go by, when you get to the levels of people that are getting 10 million listens an episode, like the top of the game. You got Dax Shepard's. Well, he has a nickname, Armcherries. You have Joe Rogan, who, does he care about what fans think? I mean, kind of. But he's be like, all right, people don't have to watch. And I know I reference him a lot, but he's really, when you look at what he does, he never asks for donations. Because he's like, I make more than enough money doing this show. Even before he went to Spotify, he made hella money. Like, really, I believe he made, before he signed with Spotify, he made $30 million the previous year. Off sponsors, revenue, and all that shit. So really, his Spotify deal, he didn't make a bowl at the rate he was at. He's not really making a whole lot more money than he would have without them, to be pretty honest about it. But what's amazing to me is how it's just a shamelessness. And you as a fan consumer, I think, like, me personally, I'm just like, if people want to watch and listen, then they'll watch and listen. Like, I don't think you have to make these growing closer to your audience type of things. Like, you either put out on your show the type of people you want to listen to your show, and whoever listens will listen, whoever won't. But then because when you start creating that too close of a bond, trying to have too close of a bond to your fandom, trying to have too close of a bond to the people that are watching, listening to your show, then you're going to start making the show, you're going to start shifting and gravitating it maybe in a direction that's not even naturally you. But you want to please the fans, even if it's not really what you want to do. And I think when people say you need to always just listen to your fans and what they want, I think you should listen to feedback and be open to feedback. It could be simple as like, hey, well, we like it when the audio is like this. We like it when the camera angle's like this. Oh, we like it when we like it when you I don't know, just like, we like these visual we like intros, we like visuals that make the podcast or whatever it is you're doing to make it more appeasing. We like it when you have more confined points, maybe shorten the podcast or actually lengthen the podcast. Don't be afraid to talk more into it. But when it starts to, we don't like it when you talk about this subject. We don't like it when you go down this road and who you are. It's like, okay, but those are things I enjoy talking about. And they're the same things that they're nothing new from when I started. And that's what I enjoy talking about. And I'm going to talk about and do what I want to do at the end of the day. It's like, because I really feel when people are investing in a podcast, a show, whatever it is, they're going to invest in the personality of the person before the structure of the show. Because I believe at the end of the day, you, the individual, the people are what make the product the product. All the big studios, the big productions, the enhancements in cameras, the angles, all this stuff. Do they make differences? Of course they do. They could be the difference between someone listening to you. They could be the difference between someone watching you for 15 minutes or someone tuning out after 2 minutes. It could be a world of a difference. But you could have all the perfect production. You could have all the perfect setups. You have the perfect audio, the top of the line, everything. But then you are talking about what? You are talking about things that will get clicks and views, but you don't really have an interest in it. Something I had to be careful of. I'm not going to lie. Like when I had that video that had 300 views and when I had the episode that had over 100 downloads, which for me at this point is a lot. I like, maybe I should start like looking up highly trending things and just always do videos about that. Do 45-minute, hour-long podcasts about that. It's like, okay, Would I probably get more views and likes in the short term? Maybe. But what if I don't care to talk about that stuff like that? What if what is ever trending that day is not really something I would care to actually talk about for that period of time, or even invested in, and it'll show? Because it's like, no, hey, that was a nice spike, but I want people a year from now be invested in me, the personality, and what it could be, and what they like and maybe they don't like. And I don't want to also get caught up in people are expecting me to talk about the hottest trending thing. That just happened to be an anomaly because I genuinely was moved by that episode. So I talked about it. I simply don't talk about other episodes on other podcasts like that. But that one stuck out to me so much and moved me. And I literally didn't pause it. I didn't change it. I listened for 3 hours straight through. Not a single pause or nothing. And man, like, that's, just that listening to that episode with her was still, like, even thinking about it now, it's really insanity. It really is. But getting back to the point. But I didn't want to get caught up. I don't want to get caught up in always chasing views and what I know people will click. Because I feel like if I keep being me, eventually the ones people will gravitate to. And as long as I get better and try to improve what I can for the time being, I believe the essence of what makes podcasting great is the simplicity in the person. And I feel like what I'm worried about now is that, like, now podcasts, the original intent and the grandiose feeling of what podcasts and what made it great and what made it spike up in media and what made it's now the biggest platform for news and interviews and information. Like Joe Rogan, I bet you go top 20 podcasts in the world. If we were able to look at their analytics and data, they probably blow the top 20 podcasts in the world, probably blow the top news, the Fox News, CNN, whichever one's on top in terms of national news. They probably blow them out of the water by like 50%. Not even an exaggeration. I know Joe Rogan does, but I even know other ones that do as well. But I think one thing I'm afraid of, it seems like sometimes now people are going to start getting so conditioned, the podcast being essentially could be overproduced, or it seems more like it could be seen too scripted. Like some could be scripted, but when it feels scripted, it like feels like, all right, is this supposed to be an impromptu, genuine podcast, or is this just basically a table read and people planning out their bits and what they're funny about and shit? Like, you should be prepared when you talk about stuff, but I don't want here. I like when people are thinking while they're talking. I like when they're talking, they're like, oh yeah, and by the way, and they add something, because when you start talking about something, another thought comes in, and then you bring back a reference that you wouldn't even thought of unless you start talking about the subject. And the one thing I'm kind of worried about, I wouldn't say aggravating, because I think quality is always good. I just think you need enough quality where it's not distracting. But to me, I just like simplicity when I listen. I like when a host interviews a comedian and it's funny as hell. Like the simplicity of, it could be just like a Bill Burr solo ranting about whatever. The simplicity. All you need is a guy, a woman, and a mic in your thought process. And now it's like all these planned out things, and I was like, cool, I guess. But I think it's good. But I do think it's good to have diversity, because there's some people that they don't want to just hear two people talk for 3 hours. I enjoy that. I enjoy listening to two people I think are interesting talk for 3 hours about. It can be about absolutely nothing, just them being humorous, shooting the shit. But some people always want something that's very like direct. They want something that's very precise and something that's very informational and cuts the fat out. And you know what? I get that as well. It's good to have that diversity. It's good to have variety. But will that variety become less variety, for lack of a better sense? And will podcasts change? It may, but yeah, I just think shamelessly asking for donations when you make a pretty good living off the show already, I think it's kind of, to me, it's kind of shameless. It's kind of, and the sad part is they are from shows that I actually like, and I'll still listen to them and watch them. I'm a fan. But now it's like, oh, become a YouTube paid member. Like, what is this? I already pay for YouTube Premium. Like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, for each individual channel, if they want to, I guess you probably have to have enough subscribers. You have to probably go through a program to prove it or whatever. But you can basically like, oh, in order to watch these videos, you pay $2 to watch this one video. And it's like, I gotta pay $2 just to watch now one interview of yours? And that may not seem a lot, like, oh, but if you're someone, let's say, puts 2 shows out a week, all right, I'm paying $4 a week for your show specifically. But you're not the only podcast I listen to. And I think what's also going to hurt, and it's like some people listen to shows because of the conveniency and that it's free. And now if you're going to start charging people money, you better make sure you have guests that you know people will watch. This is like, you don't have time to like, oh, you can't sit here and play the odds of, oh, I like this person, interesting. Maybe if I introduce them on a platform, they could start, gaining steam or whatever. It's like, well, if no one sees an unknown person that's actually very interesting, that's very insightful, very smart, witty, it's like, I'm not going to pay $2 or $3 to watch an hour and a half episode of someone that I may or may not like. I'm only going to pay if I know I like that person now. So you're also taking away the availability. You're also taking away the availability and the potential of unknown people or people gaining a rise when you start charging individual episodes. If you are a guest-based show. And I think these are things that, like, they're slowly, it's like, okay, here's what I would do. Whatever you don't want for free, put it on your Patreon. And the people that just like your show for free, they get the free version. And the people that want to support your program to a different extent and want to watch, if you want to have if you have a very, very special guest, you put it on Patreon. Then people pay for your Patreon to watch that very special guest. But I'm not going to sit here and pay $4 to watch one episode of, some neuroscientist that no one knows of. Like, that sounds bad because you should want to learn about someone. But I'm probably going to pay $4 to watch Bill Burr. Or I could just watch free podcasts of Bill Burr beforehand because I know what I'm going to get. Sometimes I think people are starting to take away the ability of freedom. People are starting to kind of make it into too much of a self-profit business, and they're not really. Ironically, they think, oh, the consumer should help out the creator. It's like, I mean, no one's. If you want to just start charging people to watch your show, by all means do it. But just know, there's a good chance that people only watch your show because it's convenient, because there's too much competition. Like, you are in one of the most saturated fields in the world. Like, I may listen to a podcast that's 20% less as good as you just because it's free, if that's what I have to do. Because most people are already paying for an app, a streaming app. Most people pay for YouTube Premium as is. And it's like, okay, I paid $2 for your podcast. I like this other podcast. I'll pay $2. It's like, that shit adds up. That's a lot of money that just adds up. And I think as a creator, like, I would never, no matter what level I get to, I would never like ask for donations like that. I would make my money off sponsors. I would make it off ad revenue. I would make people pay, like, if I'm through an app, they pay for the app. And not only do they get $10 for my show or $15 a month, whatever you use, you don't only get my show, you get just about any fucking show you want. And that's the great thing, all right? You pay $10 a month on Spotify, for example, or Google Podcast. Well, Google Podcast, you don't even pay. But like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, the two biggest platforms for podcasting and music. And I pay $10 a month to watch and listen to any podcast essentially I want, with a few exceptions, and listen to just about any major music I want. Now, I understand that, yes, artists are getting probably screwed over in some ways. But at the end of the day, I guarantee you wouldn't even care to listen to more artists, or you wouldn't even have learned about some of those artists if it wasn't basically available for the low price it is now. Because you would probably listen to singles by country artists, rap artists, and you're like, oh, I like this. And then you end up streaming the whole album, and then you become fans of them. It's like, oh, I wouldn't have listened to these songs if I had to buy an album, because I only liked one or two songs, and I would pay $18 to get a deluxe album. But I listen to all these songs, and in effect, you know what I'm probably going to do? I might even buy a tour ticket. I might go see him in concert. And so everything kind of evens out anyways. Like, I'm not saying it's a perfect business. I'm not even saying it's right. Music's a little different than podcasting for obvious reasons. Music is a whole lot harder to make than just getting in front of a microphone and just talking about whatever the fuck you want to talk about, which is really what 99% of podcasts are. But anyways, so back to, jeez, went off the rails there, Clint. Here comes Clint coming hopping down the bunny rail. But my advice would be, as a consumer, don't fall for the shameless traps. If any podcaster is telling you to directly just donate them money, just for shout outs, just to quote unquote support the pod, it's like, no. You know how you support the pod? If they have merchandise, you do what 90% of podcasts or whatever creators do. They just sell merchandise. They just create some generic t-shirt with the logo and whatever bullshit. And then, people will pay $25 and $30 and overpriced stuff. But you know what? At least you're getting something out of it, and you get to wear something that represents something you enjoy. You get something out of it. So yes, you're donating to make people millionaires, but you know what? At least you're getting something out of it more than just, oh, I helped out the pod. It's like, all right, but just like these shameless, just go on YouTube and live stream for donations, to me, it's shameful. It really is. And maybe when I get on that level, maybe I'll understand it differently, but I really don't think I do, because I don't think that's just this is the business. I think that's something that people have gotten too comfortable just shamelessly asking people for money for support of something that no one has forced them to have to support. Like, this isn't like someone asking for money for them to pay rent that month because their husband died in a car wreck and they need people to help pay the bills and shit. Like, it's not the same. Like, this is unexpected life. Like, you create a podcast that really, unless you have some high elite production, and you shouldn't have high elite production unless you're making a shitload of money anyways. So if you are spending so much more on production before it's even making a profit, and you want people to pay off the debts of what you cost to yourself, like, to me, that's being reckless, and you're putting a pressure and onus on your audience for someone they just wanted to listen to your podcast, and they liked you, and they listened and enjoyed it, and they just liked to listen to you. I don't know, man. That's when the independent route can get a little tricky, because people make it like, oh, I work so much harder because I'm independent, so people need to directly donate to me. But it's like, but if they work for a label or corporation or a company, then it's, oh, well, if you're giving your money to them, I'm only getting X amount. It's like, yeah. But the company could market it to make, even if you're only getting percentage, you 20% off. Let's just say let's say you were to, the difference between like the recent big podcast that has sold it to Spotify and stuff. They don't sell the show, the property, it's licensing, where they just put their show on there. And Spotify, it can only be on Spotify. But Spotify doesn't, quote unquote, have any say of what they say on the show, what they do the show. They literally keep the same exact show. And I don't care what people say about Joe Rogan or Armchair Expert. It's the same show as before. I think people just over time just like change. I think people over time, like doing the show, they change it up, or they become more mature about things, so they're not just outlandish, right? But that's beside the point. But I think what's very, very, very important to distinguish is, let's say it wasn't an upfront deal, right? But okay, let's go back to the Caller Daddy Barstool thing, right? They would get, I don't know the exact numbers, but basically how it would go down is they would get their base salary, and based off how many downloads they would get in a year or in an episode or whatever, and they would do it over periods. However, they would get bonuses every 3 or 6 months based off how many downloads they would get. For every, let's just say 500,000 downloads, they would get X amount added to their salary at the end of the year, blah, blah, blah. And they would get like bonuses. It'd be like if you're meeting your quotas and above, you get compensated for that. So you're literally getting paid for the output that you're putting out. Now, let's say, okay, well, you will get 40% of all pure profits you get based off the downloads and exposure, because we're going to market the hell out of it. It's going to gain us money, and it's going to gain you more money, even though you get 40% of all the profits for the show. 40% of all the profits with us as a big ass company doing the marketing is going to make you so much more than if you're just doing a bunch of independent sponsors type of thing. And that's kind of like what happened with Barstool and Caller Daddy. It was very incentive based, and that's why they were getting paid $500,000 a year the first year. Well, $500,000 salary at a certain point, but then they would get X amount. They get 50% of merch. They would get X amount for every downloads and all that shit. Because there's an incentive when you have a company that could fund it all for you. And they got to find a way for them to make a profit, so they're going to expose the hell out of it, so they bring so much in that they can make back their money and then some, and you can also get your percentage. That's what I think people lose. Like, people lose kind of perspective of all this. And, it's just like a nice reminder that it doesn't take just one person. It's not like without the individual, there's no show. But to get to a certain exposure level, you either have had to create a name outside of just a show. Like, you either have to be a comedian, an actor, or you have to be a professional or an expert in some way. Like, look, let's be honest. I'm never going to make I'm never going to make $500,000 a year by just doing podcasting if this is all I do. Now, if I were to become semi-famous in comedy or semi-famous in acting or semi-famous in some other way, if I were to just podcast and nothing but podcasts, I can make some money. But it's going to take more than just doing hour-long episodes. I'm going to have to do a bunch of other shit to maneuver to make the image more than just a podcast. For just to make it more expungible to a broader audience. But it's not just where was I going at with this? Oh, Jesus, Clint, get your shit together. But I think it's sometimes like companies and corporations are pretty responsible for most podcasts to become big. It really is. I hope that you gotta be careful when you work for a media company though. Like when you work for Cass Media Company. Yeah, I'll just say the name. Then they can dictate, they can censor out curse words because they're trying to make it appeasable to all audience. When you start working for these specific media companies that are financing your podcast specifically, when you have independent contracts with media companies, I'm not talking about streaming. I'm talking about media companies that literally they'll set up your whole studio because they want decent quality. They'll have all editing engineers of all type to make your podcast concise, to edit it, make it all perfect and all that shit. And although that sounds like, oh, it will probably help in some way, but that's when they can control what you say and not say. And it's not them saying, hey, you can't talk about this rape case, or you can't talk about this case because the owner of our company is actually friends with that person. But if you talk about it in your show, they'll just cut it out. And you don't have much say in it because they'll actually own what you can put out and not put out. They can't tell you what to say, but if you breach the contract of them having power in what you could release, then that's when you have very exclusive independent deals. That's why you got to build your leverage like you are a Joe Rogan, where you can do it by yourself and you're independently run, where you can just say no to everything. The power of no. He's like, I made money before this podcast. This podcast, we have found a way to make it work because of the show I want to do. And if you want to sponsor my show, that is fine. If I endorse it, I endorse it. But you're not going to sit here and tell me what to say or not to say, because I've already shown that I don't need any of y'all. Y'all need me. And that's the power of him. And that's why you can't really cancel him, because from the beginning, his show is what it is. It's a more mature version, a more articulate. It's a more better quality show than it was his first 5 episodes. But it's the same in terms of, this is my show. This is me. I'm going to talk to who I want to talk to. I'm going to drink. I'm going to smoke. I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want on my show. Because I have an audience that says, we will follow you. I have an audience that says, we enjoy this shit. And more importantly, I have fuck you money outside of here. And now I have got really fuck you money. And so when I see these, Jesus, I'm still going on about this. But yeah, it's just like, it's really also uncomfortable. I watched the live stream for like 10 minutes about it. And it was very uncomfortable watching this guy who I actually admire his podcast. And he makes it's a different type of podcast. It's like an interview-based podcast, but he adds animation. It is edited. And it's really cool. It's original. Like, one thing I always appreciate no matter what, if it's original and you could tell that's who that person is. And that's what I respect about it. But, just to be on a live stream and you're kind of deceiving people. And then the most uncomfortable part was watching him on the podcast. When people started donating money, he almost couldn't believe that people would be dumb enough to actually just give money to him just because he asked for it. He almost couldn't believe people would do it. He's like, oh my God, this is insane. People, and he ended up like getting $1,500. Not like he made bank, but it's $1,500 just for doing a 45-minute live stream of, hey guys, you guys are important. I'll even give you a shout out and this and that. It's like, I don't want your fucking shout out. If I like your show, I don't need a shout out. It's cool people that do it, that take the time out to do it, but I don't need your shout out to prove my allegiance to you as a consumer. Again, I will always say this, and I've said it before, and I know a lot of people. I believe your job as a creator is to make it as to make it as easy and convenient for your consumer as possible to get your product. When it starts becoming, for my channel specifically, you got to pay for this membership. I got to pay. Please sign up for this. And, oh, guys, please do this. Like, you got to go through all these holes just to watch the same show I did before. And when you have the top dogs of either YouTube and podcasting and all that shit, and they don't make their shit hard to get to, like, yeah, the platform is on. It's almost like you're trying to feel like your shit's so much more quality and better, when it's just like, all right, if you think that's the case, then charge people. But I also, 6 months from now, say, oh, well, guys, we realistically, we can't continue the show unless more money comes our way. It's like, I mean, no one's making you do the show. It's a privilege to do the show. It's cool. I want to support it. But I'm not going to, everyone's got shit to do in their own lives. Like, $75 to donate to a podcast. And how am I going to know what's going towards? How am I going to know? Like, I better see you putting that $75. I better see that Cash App or whatever you're taking money at. I better see you go to Best Buy, or I better see you go to a freaking Micro Center, and I better see you buying some audio mixing, highly terabyte freaking desktop software, whatever the fuck, hard drive. Like, you better be where it's improving the show directly. And I don't know, man. Just as someone who's been doing this, like, for what, like a month and a half? No, probably like, shit, it'll be almost 2 months. I've done this episode 36. And literally, the only money outside of a camera I already had, so I don't really include the camera. The camera, I already had the camera. I didn't buy the camera when I wanted to do a podcast. Well, kind of did, now I think about it. But it wasn't the only thing I wanted to do. But the only thing I did for the podcast specifically is I paid for RSS feed. I paid like $12 a month. I paid for RSS feed. I bought a microphone. This was like $100 some. I bought the mic stand thing. And eventually I'm going to download, some audio app thing, higher quality, and pay monthly, and where I can edit videos and shit like that once I get a different laptop. So that'll technically be an investment, because I probably wouldn't get a laptop if I wasn't a different computer laptop if I wasn't doing this eventually. But I use a Audacity free app, which Russia's probably spying on me on it. I actually did see a video where it said Audacity is probably spying on you. But yeah, all I'm saying is be careful for these creators that directly, or just people that directly tell you to please donate to me. Me. All because I put out the show for consumption on a platform where billions of videos are put out a day. I should be the one you donate to. Like, there's just such an arrogance to it. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I guess, you know what? If you never ask, you never know. It's free money. I mean, it's not illegal. Here's what I do. Yeah, I got a solution to this, actually, for real. All right, I'll give an exception to this, right? I'll give the benefit of the doubt. Let's say if you were going to ask for people to directly, because you always hear, oh man, it costs a lot of money to make podcasts. And for some it may. But here's what I would ask. If you are going to directly ask your fans to directly donate to your podcast, right? That's outside of where they actually get some out of it. I want you should have to, just as a courtesy, I want you to disclose how much it takes a month from the technology you use, from what editing shit you use, the time you put in. I don't deny that it takes a lot of time. The audio, if you do editing and shit, I don't do editing, so for me, I just upload the video to my laptop. It'll take like an hour to an hour and a half to upload just because it's slow, but then once it uploads and it processes, whatever. Not really the funnest thing to talk about, but overall, it's probably like a couple hour process to record, upload, and then whatever. But you should disclose and you should explain and give very specific numbers of how much it takes. Basically, show them the accounting. Like Joe Budden refused to show Rory Mal. Because you constantly say, oh, it takes all this money. Like, okay. Show how much it takes. Because it's hard for me to believe that setting up some microphones, putting up a couple cameras, that it takes $5,000 a month to produce a generic podcast. We're not talking about the Joe Rogans where they're probably putting money into it just because they have money to put into it. But most people like me, or most people that just kind of do it in their house or room, like, how much money are you really putting into it? And you probably shouldn't put a lot of money into something that it's costing you more money in the meantime, but it's not something that should take a lot of. If you have to put so much money into something for it to be appealing or interesting, then it's probably just not that good. Then maybe maybe it's, you got to break down the essence and the basics of what would make it better. That doesn't take a whole lot of this, that, and the other. But I think if you were going to ask, you know what? Fine. You want to go on YouTube, you want to live stream, you want to ask for money, whatever. Because we just assume as consumers that, oh, it must take hundreds of thousands of dollars if they're saying they it must take $10,000 a month to do this and that and the other. And it's like, I'm watching some of these shows, I'm like, I don't think it takes $10,000 to make this. I really don't. It's just I just don't get that. I really don't. I really don't. I think if you were going to ask your consumers to do whatever, and before you say, well, Walmart doesn't disclose their numbers when they set prices, it's like, okay, we need to stop cross-referencing. It's like when people try to cross-reference sports locker rooms to a work environment. The work environment in football is just going to be different than your work environment of Panera Bread. It just is, okay? Because there's just certain things, like, it's just not the same. And we need to stop trying to acknowledge that, oh, well, it's no different than in a work environment. It's like, yeah, it's 100% different. In a work environment, you're not seeing your teammate's dick hang out in front of an interview reporter. You're not getting reported after the worst moments of your day. Like, oh man, you just got in an argument with a customer because they called you a fucking cunt. and you lose your shit, snap, punch them in the face, they fall on the ground, the cops come, you go to jail, and you say, white on white crime, doesn't count. And then you don't have an interview right after, be like, so why did you knock him out? It's like, well, he was disrespecting. It's like, man, see, no, that's not how this works. We need to stop, like, comparing, like, oh, you should only get paid for what you do, and you gotta know your worth. It's like, man, that's not really how these things go. But whatever. People always try to compare things that aren't really comparable. And so people asking for money for something that I question how much money it really takes. All I'm asking is, when you watch a show and they're saying, oh, it takes so much money, people have no idea how much money it takes to do this shit. I want you to just generally ask, how much do you think it takes for lower the mid-level podcasts to operate? Again, we're not talking about the best of the best where they have producers, audio, like the highest of technology, the cameras. Like, you don't even have to go down the barrel like where I am right now, but just middle tier, just more regular comedian, just like comedians that do it with another comedian, they do it in their apartment. Like, how much do you really think? How much do you really think it takes for them to finance and operate that? That's all I ask. But yeah, moral of the story is, what is the moral? The moral of today's show is, don't just listen. Don't just give money to creators just to give money. And like, generally, it's okay to question. Like, it's okay to say no to exclusive joining to podcasts that were once free. It just is. There's too much competition. It's okay to be like, you know what? I like your show, but I'm not going to pay per episode to watch the same show. I'm just not. Alright, that was episode 36 of the Off and Beat podcast. Remember to like and subscribe. Tell me if you like this camera angle. It feels more relaxing. I feel like I talk better. I'm more relaxed. But yeah. Remember to follow the IG, the TikTok, and suck some titties. I am tired as hell today. I'm tired as hell. It's 2 a.m. now. But we got through it. Builds character. And yeah, builds character. Alright. Have a great day. I don't know if I'm going to post this Saturday or Sunday. Probably post a video Saturday. Upload the audio Sunday. Either ways, have a great day. Oh yeah, I'll leave with this message. Not that no one's listening at this point. But just know that I want to stress that someone's been doing this. This shit, it's, I wouldn't say for what I do, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a lot of hard work per se, but it is something that you gotta make schedule and plan time for, especially when you have an everyday life. You have work, you have other obligations, you have hobbies and shit. Like, it is something that you have to make time for, and it is a little sacrificing. Like, you're gonna have to stay up when you're tired, because that may be the only time you're available that day. You know, it's about pumping it out. It's not, I wouldn't call this a daily podcast. I kind of just do it when I'm in the mood. I try to do as much as I can. I would say at least 3 to 4 times a week. I'm trying to, you know, put enough out there, but not overdo it. One thing I'm working on is I only want to do podcasts when I actually feel like I'm in the right mindset to give something worthwhile for people to listen to. And I feel like I've had a couple duds in the past, like 7 or 8 episodes, just because I tried to force it in a sense where I wasn't 100% all there. But you know what? It's just part of the process. And you only figure it out by doing it. 36 episodes in, I think something I'm pretty proud of. And you know what I would never do? Do a live stream and ask you for $20. But hey, if you want to send me $20, I'm not gay, but $20 is $20. That's that. Oh, jeez, look at this fucking zit. Good thing I don't give a fuck. And